Joe Flowers for RedDirtSurvival.com, here today to introduce you to the use of a machete, its application toward camping, bushcraft, and tips, tricks, and techniques.
Now the first thing we're going to go over is the pinch grip. And I'm going to talk about this real fast. It's really hard to have a Latin American teach you this, because it's kind of like you walking up to some other guy and going, hey, how do I use a hammer? It's something really simple that most Central and South American people know, and even Malaysians and South Pacific machete and large blade users know, but a lot of us North Americans don't know about it, and we end up getting blisters all over our hands because we're sitting there trying to use a really big knife or something like that really hard, because we like to grab the machete and take it out and use it with this crazy hard fist ice pick death grip. There's a lot of words right there too. But you don't have to do that with the machete. What most people who use a machete a lot adapt is something called the pinch grip. And that's more or less pinching with just your hand like that and holding it. Now you may want to try and use a lanyard, you may not. Personally, I don't use a lanyard attaching a rope to my hand because I've never seen anybody in Central and South America do it. And when the thing falls off, the big blade like this is swinging all over towards your nether regions, and I don't like that. So no lanyard for me personally. You may have your own opinion, of course, and you're entitled to it. Pinch grip. It's taking the machete and having a loose grip and letting that flick carry the cut through. Not just sitting there like this and hacking, but getting a quick flick all the way through. Now that's a piece of very hard dogwood. This is much more applicable towards light vegetation and green vegetation rather than a dead piece of wood there. Now you still can use that hard grip. You may use that for more hard chopping on thick, dead, dry wood too, and it may help you a little bit, but you may want to try this out and see how much farther you get to penetrate in. Let's go give you some examples, because I don't want to just sit here and talk about machetes all day in front of stuff. Let's go cut something. Alright, now before we just start cutting stuff like crazy, we should talk a little bit about safety. Of course, you can use gloves if you don't want to have blisters. I suggest Hex Armor gloves that have a whole lot of cut resistance to them. It's not going to stop a machete from really slicing you, but it's there. Alright, you can wear gloves if you'd like to, especially if you're working around briars. We'll get into that later on. When you're cutting, you want to look around you, make sure there's nothing up here that can catch it and make it fall down. So you want to look around you, maybe do this real quick, make sure. I've had this happen a lot. It doesn't get cut in vines when you do it on the upswing. Now, one very important rule is that you want to be at least 10 feet away. 5 to 10 feet away while somebody else is using a machete in front of you. I've personally seen people get cut by people falling back and slinging their machete. I've seen a kid get cut that way before. I've seen people fall back and throw their machete backwards. Not fun to see this thing coming right back at your face. Stuart Gorman from the UK, who does a lot of expeditions in Borneo, recommends walking like this with your parang or machete. That way when you fall, you throw it out of the way when you're falling down. There's two people who get cut, the beginners and the experts. I got a big gash on my foot here from not being safe, which comes to another important thing. Good footwear. Try not to do this barefoot or in thong sandals. Now, you may have seen on TV, or maybe traveling internationally, people using machetes while being barefoot or in thong sandals. Well, there's a real good reason for that. They're better than you at it. They've been using these machetes all their lives. I met 5-year-olds that can swing a machete way better than I hope to ever be able to. They have had it ingrained into their way of life every single day. More familiar with the machete than you are your cell phone. So that's why they're using it. Wear some footwear. It's one more level of protection. There, I said it. If you're gonna cut, use something that's heavy. Also, cutting like this, not a really cool option if you want to keep walking, I think. So change your stance, maybe put it that way. That way that foot's not in the way and you've got an arc that's open. You can cut like this sometimes and you may find yourself cutting, but try and be careful of that. Sometimes I'll even follow all the way through with my hip so that this comes all the way back. When I'm cutting, I don't want to just cut straight on like this. Cutting flat, you know, parallel with something is a good way not to cut it. You always want to cut at an angle. At an angle. Now, there's a tulip poplar over here. This is a sapling. I'm not afraid of cutting this tulip poplar down because there are a bunch of trees around it and it's going to get choked out It's already starting to get choked out as far as competition goes, and I'm going to use it for another tool later on called a grabat, and we'll get into that. But when I'm coming through here, I'm not just cutting like this. If I want to get to my path, I'll cut at angles. Now, this is a big green tree. All right, you can cut the thin stuff like this, sometimes just cutting it straight like that, but it's much easier to cut at an angle like that, 45-degree angle. All right, this way, I'm getting in halfway this way, it comes all the way down. Quite simple, quite simple. Now, this is kind of funny. It's not funny if you're a vampire though, because this could kill you. It'd hurt if you're a human though anyway. You got something this big just sticking up out of the ground, and if it's your campsite, people might have a tendency to fall on it and stake themselves, and it's bigger than a splinter, and hospital visits, blah, 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 blah. So you may want to cut down lower, maybe 2 cuts, one up there and one lower still. Machetes have a low rock well, like 52, 51, so that they don't chip if they hit a rock on the ground. You'll have a nice little ting when you have a good machete, unless it's not tapered. We'll get into that later on. But if you miss and hit a rock in the ground, it should have a kind of dent that you can beat out, and we'll show you how to fix that later on too. So here lower, because we're being good stewards, maybe just come over here and just lop it off that way. That's not the piece that I want. We see how we're cutting at angles here. You can still cut on both sides too for saplings and stuff. Maybe you'll cut here and then cut here at an angle instead of just completely lopping all the way through. But you always want to try and go at angles. All right, we're about to make what has been termed more or less as a grabat, and that's a little hooky thing to help hook a whole bunch of these nasty briars out of the way. For this situation, I don't have gloves or good eye protection on, so I want to stay as far away from the briars as possible. And also sometimes this little grabat helps for cutting very low to the ground. Now I'm not going to try and defoliate this whole tree. I just found a nice fork here that I'm going to try and use. Watching my hand up here too. There we go, there's a grabat. A grabby fork, or a grabby hook looking thing to hook briars out of the way so you can cut them better. All right, now you see how to use a grabat. Now let me show you a video of somebody who really knows how to do it. Now, you'll find that the shorter machetes are easier to use. That's because they're not unwieldy. Generally, you can start out with small machetes if you're trying to become a machete nut and start working your way to much longer machetes. I think this one's 26 inches. Now, when you're using a longer machete, you'll find that there's a lot more flexion in the way it wants to bend. The guys who have used a long machete, such as this one for a while, tend to lead with their elbow a little bit more. So, once again, using the pinch grip, leading with the elbow a little bit more to get the flickiness all the way through. Flicky, flicky. This is more of the typical style of machete sheath that you'll find in Costa Rica and Central America, South America. When you put these in, generally you don't want to put your hand along that side if you can avoid it. This little flange here, I took off the frog that goes onto the side of your hip because I don't normally wear it like that. I just use this leather flange here to stick it in my belt like so, and have that just dangle across the back. I like it. That's one way to carry your machete. Of course, you can carry it on a strap underneath here just like this, or on your pack, other various ways. Or you may not have a sheath at all. You may just carry it bareback style. All right, now we're going to go over some bushcrafting tips and tricks with the machete. Here's a stick of, I guess, tulip poplar. You don't need to use a machete for this, but it sure is fun. Here's, of course, material that you can pull off of this, but you can, if you come in over here and look, with just the back edge, you can get some super fine material. You can pull this off, of course, with your hands, but what you may not know is that you can get quite an amount of tinder just by doing this easy little step right here. I got some more gathered here. Yeah, that might be sharp enough. And this is all just with the back of the machete too. There we go, that's a good spot. Now, not to be confused with this technique, which makes us, of course, a great little fuzz stick setup. All right, you're trying to get small pieces here for your fire. You start cutting them, they just hit somebody like the camera woman. They shoo them all over the place. So how do you make sure you don't hit important things like the camera woman, or have to walk around the campsite gathering all this kindling shrapnel you just made? Today, you've gained an introduction to the use of machetes, with an addition of some bushcrafting tips and tricks. I'm Joe Flowers, here for Red Dirt Survival. Stay tuned for part 2 of using a machete, and also bushcrafting with the kukri, and using an introduction to Malaysian parangs, where you get to learn cool stuff like the pistol grip. Stay tuned.